topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, Portland. Welcome to another Ask the Expert show where we bring you the top experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Hey, we have got a great show for you today. In fact, I was just getting ready to tell our expert, and I'm going to call him Dr. K, because we got a phone call from a listener who said that they found our show by accident, and Dr. K was on there, and he said he's my doctor. His name is Robert, and he told me the type of treatment, which I could not pronounce, but he said that Dr. K is the greatest doctor. I had major pain, I think he said, in his wrist, and he has completely cured me. And he just went on and on. And let me welcome you we'll call him Dr. K. Good afternoon, Chris.
Hi, nice. Thank you for having me on. No pressure now after that introduction.
Yeah, really. No, he said, I found the show, and he said, I've got to find out when the next show is. And I just thought he just complimented you up and
Oh,
down.
that's sweet.
And, when it comes to functional medicine, you get probably a lot of that where their doctors said, I give up. There's nothing wrong with you, when there is.
Sure.
But tell us about your practice, Upgrade Medical.
Sure. So it's by its nature a functional medicine practice, which essentially means we try to either get to the root cause of something that's going on, or kind of optimize you for longevity or optimal health or whatever the case may be, right? And so we utilize a variety of techniques to do that, from specialized testing that's typically not available in the traditional biomedical model, to technology and peptides and hormones and all the things that people are seeing nowadays advertised.
It is amazing what you can do now. And I mean, we can do a whole show on hormones, but my first question is, there's integrated and then there's functional medicine. What's the difference?
So, there's actually several definitions, right? Natural medicine, complementary medicine, integrated medicine, et cetera, naturopathy, et cetera. Each sort of specialty has its own definition, chiropractic, et cetera. I have personally always preferred integrated medicine. That's the approach. That's the actual interventions, whereas functional medicine is the philosophy, right? If that makes sense. So functional medicine is trying to address root cause issues and doing it from a systems level approach, meaning we take all the systems, see how they're interacting, and treat that as a whole. And we do that with at least my opinion and the way I practice is that we do that with integrated medicine. I'm sure everybody has their own take. I personally, it doesn't matter to me if somebody needs a peptide, an herb, a medication, or whatever. What that patient needs is what they're going to get. Obviously, when we can, we want to use, natural things to promote the body. that's not always possible, and sometimes the risk level warrants a medication. Um, and so you just give the patient what they need, and I think that's truly what integrated medicine is, and that can encompass anything from acupuncture to chiropractic to physical therapy to peptides to medications.
We just got our first text from Neil in Vancouver,
Hi,
who
Neil.
wants to he wants to know what type of health issues do you treat?
So historically, my area of expertise has been what's called central pain syndromes. So that's classically considered things like fibromyalgia, but lots of things cause central pain and fatigue. It can be from autoimmunity or Ehlers-Danlos, things like that. But in that regard, I would say I'm kind of a specialized generalist, right? Having done 17 years of that level of chronic complex pain and disease, you had to kind of look at every system. So I can treat everything from small intestinal bacterial overgrowth to post COVID, long COVID, to just anti-aging. So it's pretty broad. Um, and when it becomes necessary, if I think I'm not getting a needle to move, I have a network of people that maybe just do one particular thing. And if I need to, I'll leverage them and loop them into the care.
Craig in Portland wants to know, he said, I heard you just say COVID. How did you treat COVID when it came around several years ago? That's a good question.
It is, and it would depend on the case. Where I was working at the time, I had a little less leeway um,
Ah,
than I would approach it now. Um, but usually it was integrated. Some people were vaccinated, some people weren't. Some people needed uh, antiviral medications when they came out. I usually would try and combine those with things like immune supportive peptides, nutrients, herbs. Um, we knew a lot about some of the mechanisms and we tried to intervene on that. So, for example, high dose vitamin C and herbs that blocked the ACE receptor that COVID sort of attached to, which are things like propolis. The thymic peptides are immune modulating and antiviral. There was sambucol, which is an elderberry extract that's known to be antiviral.
hmm.
At that time we were extrapolating physiology, and that data was changing pretty consistently and pretty rapidly. I know a lot of people were there was obviously all sorts of controversy of how to treat that. Um,
Yes.
Oh, and so and there was data to both support and refute that in various ways. But I think ultimately, uh, you know, like anything else, I tried to do it for the patient, what that individual patient needed.
No, Chris, I got to tell you that we saw a lot of doctors that had their own way of treating COVID, and they were, ridiculed, made look foolish, and now it turns out that they were right. And I was one of those. I got the first two injections, and I still got COVID. My third time I got COVID, I was treated with a cocktail, and it was
Hmm.
gone within a day.
Yeah.
In a
Yeah,
day.
there's a lot to that. Certainly I utilized a lot of like IV therapy and nutrient
Yes.
injections at high doses and things like that. But it doesn't mean I didn't use medications either, right? A lot also when you're looking at a patient depends on that person's status, right? Are they elderly? Do they have risk factors that would maybe, if you're immune suppressed, you've got to weigh risk rewards. I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm sure that's probably a question. I'm not. That being said, we know there's some issues with the mRNA vaccines long
Right.
term. So you
Mm.
have to really evaluate risk reward ratio, right? Because you know getting COVID, if you have significant risks, right? You're diabetic, have no vitamin D, or elderly or sarcopenic, something like that, you're at higher risk. It probably warrants the injection, in my opinion. A healthy person, if they're doing all the right things, maybe not. But evaluating which is the correct approach, I'm going to say I don't think we've nailed it yet. I really don't. I think we can look at from a specific angle. Hey, the vaccine may pose this risk, and there's some long COVID risks that maybe are cumulative on top of that due to spike proteins. But on the flip side, we see reduced morbidity in other conditions. So how to tease that out, I think is more complex and not quite as black and white as we would like it to be, right? Or that
Yes.
we're seeing argued on social media. It's just not that. Well, like everything else in our world currently, it's become kind of very polarized, and that's typically not the answer, right?
We just got another text really coming in today. Hi, Dr. Chris. I'm enjoying your
Hello.
show. I've actually heard
Oh, great.
I've
Thank you.
actually heard a lot about you,
Uh-oh.
and I want to know, do you deal with diet?
I do. I do. It's interesting, I'm talking about all these like really fancy things, but when I first started functional medicine at the very beginning, I was very fortunate to train with one of the founders, who wrote one of the original textbooks on it. So I consider myself very lucky in that regard. And this was, well, I don't want to date myself here, but it was a long time ago. At that point, we were really heavily, it was diet and supplements. Peptides weren't really emerging yet. There was a lot of IV therapy that we could leverage, but there was, this was an exploration. So yes, I do, I call that one of the pillars of health. I don't care. And I think we talked about this last time when I gave the example of the water bottle and
Yes.
stuff spilling out. I can do all sorts of fancy things. None of it's going to work if you're not sleeping, you eat McDonald's every day, you're, staying up, random sleep schedule. I'm good, but I'm not
Sounds
that
like our
good.
president.
Right? I'm not that good. So, I do consider diet a pillar of health, and we do try to dial that in, for people. I'm not an extremist. And of course, that's a whole nother show that you could argue gluten-free and this free and that free, right? I would say the majority of cumulative evidence and I'm saying this without knowing that there is a specific thing that needs to be addressed, just generally, is kind of a modified Mediterranean diet, right? That has the best evidence. And, typically that does include your grains. Now, there's definitely some problems with our grains versus other parts of the world. And if you have specific things, right, whether it be diabetes or a heart risk, a cardiovascular disease risk, or maybe a gastrointestinal disorder, an autoimmune condition, there's modifications that you would layer onto that. My preference is, and they're not, my preference is to do testing for food sensitivities and GI things. Would you gamble your life on it? No, but I think that they can be very clinically relevant in terms of helping guide someone. And I also use tools like continuous glucose monitoring or breath testing for carbohydrate and fat burning status, things like that to help dial in fasting states and those sort of things. So, yep, key therapy.
Sean wants to know, hey, great show. It's about time someone did a show like this. I want to
Oh,
know if you could do a show in the near future on some of what you think of the theories of Kennedy. I guess because
ooh, uh,
that could be a whole show easily.
that could be a whole show. So,
Yes.
I don't want to
And
get
we'll get,
myself
you
in
know what,
trouble
maybe,
here, but
no, you know what, that's what's so great about podcasts. We can talk about anything we want. And we'll save that for maybe next month because
Okay,
I think
sure.
people don't know and want to be educated. Is he giving us the right information? You agree with? I think it's more that people trust you
Well, I
than
mean, here's what I'll say about it, and I'm happy to weigh in whatever my opinion's worth on him as a thing. Again, I don't think anything's specifically black and white. I am completely opposed, for example, to him undermining sort of our world health presence and some
Mm,
of our CDC epidemiology and things like that. But then I'm 100% behind him when he says we got to get rid of food colorings and dyes and chemicals in
ah,
food, right? So what are we talking about? That's right. It's not RF is it RFK? Uh, is he
y-
correct? He, Nobody is entirely correct or wrong, right? I think you have to discuss what the particular point is. In some respects, it's going to be great for the functional medicine world because he'll probably protect things like IVs and peptides and nutrients. But on the flip side,
yes.
are we gonna see some problematic, world health sequelae of disease states and it coming to fruition because of that? So that's where
That
I'll
makes
leave it
sense.
at that.
Okay. You talk about peptides is very important to you in your practice.
Yeah. Hmm.
Uh, Tell us about the strategies behind peptides.
Yeah, I think so I utilize a lot of them myself. I sort of I always sort of try to, I mean, within reason and legality, I try to test my protocols on myself. Um, and I actually have
Oh,
a funny story about ending up in the ER a couple weeks ago for this. Um, but the strategy is remember when I said functional medicine kind of takes a systems level approach? So
yes.
imagine what I want everybody to do is kind of imagine Venn diagrams, right? And layer circles on top of each other, all intersecting in the middle. And if each one of those circles represented a body system, the idea when a patient is in front of you or has a problem, et cetera, is to identify what are our key systems that need to be addressed, and then what are the supportive systems. And when I utilize peptides, what I try to do, which I would say for the most part is pretty doable, not always, but for the most part, is utilize a peptide that acts on one system and supports others, right? And so that you get this synergy. And one of my favorite kind of jokey sayings is my entire goal is to make 2 + 2 = 6. We want synergy of treatment, right? So that we get those
Yes.
foundational things. Because often, one of the issues with, like, and I'm not anti-Western medicine by any means, it's just different. It's a linear approach designed for one particular strategy versus what we do. And so it's completely different. So a lot of our things take time, right? To see a dietary correction or a peptide correction or a nutrient shift, something like that takes time. So sometimes you do then need to add a med into one of those systems to buy yourself some time for that supportive things that are overlapping to work. Did that Was that clear?
Yes. That makes sense. So, what are some of the most useful peptides?
Yeah. Some of my favorites, I'm a big fan of the thymic peptides for a couple reasons. Um, One, they're immune modulating. So, meaning they prevent it from being overactive and they boost it up if it's underactive. And it does that via particular cell balancing in the system. And the downstream effect of that is you also get anti-inflammation and you get some improvement in overall systems. So because the immune system, right, is influencing a lot of things, right? Autoimmunity, allergies, psoriasis, right? The GI system, everything. So modulating that can be really helpful in a lot of ways. Even if there's, air quote, nothing wrong with you, as we age, we get kind of lower immune function, immunosenescence. And so it's kind of a halting of our immune system. And that's a good strategy to help both keep our immune system up so we're not getting infections as we get older. Because if you look at the data, a lot of people, elderly people, do get, pneumonias and candidas and things like that. And this can help to prevent that, amongst other strategies, and reduce inflammation, which we know is tied to a lot of chronic disease. So the thymic peptides are high on my list. I utilize a lot of the repairing peptides. So these are the ones that probably people see all over Instagram and social media, body protective compound 157 and thymosin beta, which is often called TB500, which is a fragment of that. Combined, they often advertise it as the Wolverine stack after the Marvel superhero. Those are really great peptides. They can be utilized for a lot of things, and they're often layered into the systems. One of my other absolute favorites is ARA290, which is actually a FDA-approved drug that was originally studied for a very specific thing, lupus-induced peripheral neuropathy. So almost nobody could get this drug covered except for, that's a fairly rare condition.
Right.
But when they looked at the data, it was literally repairing peripheral nerves in that condition. So then they went and looked at it for diabetes, and it was repairing those. And in the retina, secondary to both lupus and diabetes, and it was repairing that. And then we saw some of the side effects, which were things like heart rate improvement and lower liver fat, right, for non-alcoholic fatty liver. And so the reason that is because if you think of the nervous system and you're repairing it, right, you're putting let's say electrical tape, right, around a weakened section, and then you get better end result signaling, and that means better end function. My opinion is that it's also working centrally, meaning from the brain and spinal cord. So I utilize it a lot for brain injuries, small gastrointestinal disorders because of the gut-brain connection, certainly in things like post and long COVID or post-viral fatigue syndromes, because COVID in particular, viruses kind of carve out geography, and COVID, and for example, lodges in the vagal nerve, where like shingles, the varicella virus, lodges in dermatomes. And so those are nerve direct attacks that we can utilize this as one method to help. And then as example, you would combine that with maybe the anti-inflammatory BPC, which is a repair peptide, and the thymic peptides to support the immune system. And then now you have that synergy. That was a lot.
Hey, Chris,
sorry.
got up the show. No, it's okay. The show goes by so fast. Tell people how they can reach your office.
Sure. You can call the office number, which is 971-299-8350. It's not monitored, but you can leave a message and I will get back to you. And it's also textable. Or you can schedule a free discovery call on the website, which is Upgrade PDX, like the abbreviation for Portland, upgradepdx.com. Or you can just pop in. I'm inside the 24-hour fitness in the Pearl.
Beautiful. Hey, Chris, thank you. Pete, we had so many more questions, but we'll get to those next month. Chris, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you all for having
Take care,
me.
buddy.
Have a great day.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.